For January 8th, call to order. Have our agenda required vote. Second. Moved by Moines, seconded by Altoona. Any discussion? And all those in favor, please say aye. 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 It is approved. We have a presentation on our 2025 audit. Bill.
He's on. Okay, thank you. We have with us Joe Sparks from Denman, who's our auditing firm. He's here to present the audit. And I don't know, Joe, if you have anything you actually want to share on the screen. Otherwise, we can pull up a copy of the audit maybe. But the audit was sent. It was linked in the agenda packet. I will also note that the finance subcommittee met and heard a presentation from one of Joe's colleagues, Robert, last month, so in December, and they discussed it, recommended approval of it, but we want to bring it to you today, and it'll also be before the policy committee in a couple weeks. I'll turn it over to Joe, let him tell us what they found.
Thanks, Dylan. Yeah, I'll go ahead and share my screen to show the annual audit here. In 1 second. Are you guys able to see that okay?
Yeah,
Not yet.
Okay.
Very exciting stuff. Yeah,
How
it
about
is. Yeah.
Great. So like Dylan mentioned, my name is Joe Sparks. I'm with Denman and Company. I'm the manager on the NPO audit engagement. Our team consisted of myself, Brad Swanson, and then Robert Andrus, the partner on the engagement, who was the one who presented back in December. So I'll go ahead and go through the audit report. Feel free to ask me any questions or stop me at any point, and we can kind of discuss if needed. So first, I'll flip ahead to page 3. This is where we have our audit opinion. I'm pleased to say for fiscal year 25, we had a clean audit in all material respects. The financial position of the governmental activities in the major fund are deemed to be materially correct. That's kind of what our main goal is to do our audit procedures, and at the end we issue our audit opinion. That's where it shows up as in these 2 paragraphs here on page 3. I'll skip ahead now and go to the financial statements, which will be on page 12. So current assets, cash and pooled investments for fiscal year 25 are about $1,274,000. AR is about $900,000 for the year. And then the big one there would be due from other governmental units. There's about $4.3 million from the Iowa DOT at year end. This is mainly the final couple months of reimbursement requests for the planning funds and for the water trails project that flow through on this line. Total current assets for the year were $6.6 million at 6/30/25. And then total assets, once you add back capital assets, were about $7.1 million for the NPO for fiscal year 25. I'm moving down below the current liabilities. So the big ones here are accounts payable and unearned revenues. Accounts payable, because it's mainly of the water trails payments for the May and June pay apps that came in after year end. They were paid subsequent to 6/30. And unearned revenues relates to the water trails project also. This would be funding that was received by mainly Icon for future payments on the water trails project. So overall, the net position at 6/30/25 ends up being $1.1 million. And it's broken out there between unrestricted and net investment and capital assets. Going ahead to the statement of activities. So with governmental financials, as you can see, you're probably most used to, they kind of roll up into a few rows here. So for expenses, which I can go into detail a little bit farther down the report, the total was $13.7 million for fiscal year 25. And revenue includes about $12.7 million in operating grants and contributions. And then you have member assessments, about $600,000. Quite a bit of interest this year, $53,000 in interest income. So total change in that position there is a loss of $387,589. So that position at the end of the year was $1.1 million at fiscal year 25 or 6/30/25. So going ahead here to balance sheet. So I'm not going to get too much into detail. For the most part, the governmental fund reflects the two statements previously, just more on a cash basis and takes out kind of the GASB journal entries we do specifically for the full accrual governmental wide financials. So we don't include the adverse pension activity, capital assets, and things like that in this statement. And here's a reconciliation that reconciles back between the two, between the balance sheet and the statement of the position. Similarly, here on the statement of activities, we unwind the GASB pieces here. So the fund balance at the end of the year was 951,901. And here's a reconciliation back between the statement of activities and the statement of changes in fund balance. So I'll skip ahead now. These are mostly going to be, note one's mostly going to be carried forward from previous years. There wasn't any significant changes in note one. I'll go down to note 5 here. So note 5, we disclose the grant award for fiscal year 26, just to say this grant was awarded before year end, and these are the planning funds that the organization has available for its operations going forward. So we disclose the 1.6 million there from the Iowa Department of Transportation to be used in future fiscal years. I'll go ahead now to note 7, which was a new note we added this year. I think this note's important because it adds a little bit more detail on the water trails project and kind of based on the significance and all the different governmental entities involved in that project. I think it's worth making note and kind of disclosing kind of the progress of that project, when it's expected to be completed, how much funding's been used, and how much available funding there was for the project. And we also disclosed the line of credit agreement with Icon that the NPO has, or that Icon has with its bank, where NPO is listed as its guarantor, or I can't think of the other term they used, but the balance, there was a zero balance at year end for that line of credit, which I confirmed with Icon during our audit procedures. Note 8 is a change in accounting principle. So during fiscal year 25, all governmental entities were required to implement GASB 101 compensated absences. We perform procedures on the usage of compensated absences in the past 3 fiscal years, since it was supposed to be retroactively applied. And we determined it did not have a significant effect on the NPO's financial statements, so there was not a restatement. But we are required to disclose that this policy was implemented during fiscal year 25. Going ahead now to the budget to actual comparison. Total revenues were under the budget by about 10 million, and total expenditures were under the budget by about the same amount. This is mainly just due to the water trails project being included on the full budget, rather than, so that's really what's causing the variance there. So in total, the change of fund balance there, about 10,964. So I'll go ahead now to the schedule of expenditures. I think this is useful because it kind of breaks down that 13.7 million we see on the previous financial statements and breaks it down by kind of the nature of the expense. So the main item here will be the water trails. There's about 11 million in expenses for the water trails project there in fiscal year 25. And there's also a good amount of special projects, and also the Safe Streets project and the multi-model economic impact study. So those combined make about 12 million of the total of 13.7. Then the other major categories there would be salaries and wages. And we do break below equipment purchases too, since this is a GASB item that gets added back, to reconcile back to the governmental expenditures amount on the previous financial statements. Next is the CFA for fiscal year 25. So our major programs for this year were the National Infrastructure Investment Project. This is the Water Trails Fund, federal funding, total about 8.1 million in fiscal year 25. Then our other major program was the Highway Planning and Construction Project, which 891,000 during this year. So these were the 2 programs we specifically tested and performed additional procedures on for our single audit uniform guidance testing. Total federal awards expended for fiscal year 25 were 9.8 million. Next, I'll go to our report on internal control over financial reporting and compliance. So going ahead here, we didn't have any state of Iowa um, compliance findings, but we did have right here on page 37, we did identify a deficiency in internal control, which we consider to be a material weakness. This is named as finding 2025-001. Next is our report on compliance as required by uniform guidance, which here we also reference the same finding, which I'll go into detail here in a second. But this one will be considered 2025-002, but really the same finding. We just have to report it in two different places on the financials. Let's go ahead to page 43 here. So our finding relates to our financial reporting. So underneath the condition there, significant year-end adjusting entries were not properly recorded in the organization's financial statements, primarily related to receivables and payables for the water trails project. These were corrected during the audit process, so the books are in good shape now. Really, this relates to just a couple of journal entries at year-end that we had to post related to the water trails project, mainly related to the June 2025 activity that was not included in QuickBooks on the unadjusted trial balance that we received. Our recommendation is management should continue to work on year-end closing procedures to properly identify receivables and payables, and it should continue to utilize accounting staff to assist with the financial accounting system entries and bank recs. Then management's response, which we've included here, they acknowledge their finding related to year-end receivables and payables, and the adjustment is noted to be related to a limited number of invoices received after fiscal year end. They'll continue to refine closing year procedures and coordinate with its accounting consultant and independent auditors to ensure receivables and payables are identified, recorded in the appropriate fiscal year. So we determined the conclusion response to be accepted. I think we have a game plan to kind of get this fixed here going forward. I think it's really just a couple of journal entries, and it's based on just using like on the payable side, just using service dates rather than like invoice date, pay app date. I'm going ahead. So this just refers to the page above. We have to list the finding here also, but rather than spell it out fully twice, we just say refer to page 43 to see finding 2025-001. The final page here would be our schedule of findings and question costs for the state of Iowa compliance. We didn't have any issues or findings related to the state of Iowa code compliance for fiscal year 25. And then the next page will be our corrective action plan. So this just refers to the findings on that page 43. This is a schedule of prior audit findings. So we did have a similar finding in the prior year, which we are required to show here as whether it was corrected or not. So I know I went through that fairly briefly, just because I wasn't sure what Robert had covered last month. But if there's anything you want me to go into more detail, I'm free to do so. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Any questions? All right, thank you. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, thanks. Have a good day.
Up next is our report and discuss. Our first item is going to be changes to federal classification. I asked Mark to step up to the podium.
Okay, thank you very much. So back in December, Polk County Public Works reached out to the MPO staff with some recommendations to the federal functional classification system for county roads, mostly in the county. This map here gives IRPG's guidance on who is responsible for making the resolution for a federal functional roadway classification change. The one thing I'll note is that most of the recommended changes by Polk County are the responsibility of Polk County. There is one corridor that requires the NPO to be the responsible party for the functional classification. this lists the county's recommended changes. Again, they need to coordinate with us just to say, here's what we're planning to do. Do you have any recommendations? We did have one recommendation, which was for this Northeast 78th Avenue between Northeast 29th Street and Highway 65. It's actually to break it at the city of Bondurant, so the section of the corridor that goes through Bondurant falls within the MPO's responsibility and coordinated with the city of Bondurant. Just be a clarification of whether or not they accepted this recommended change from a major collector to a minor arterial. They did. So our recommendation is to go ahead and approve the federal functional classification change for this segment of Northeast 78th Avenue in the city of Bondurant to be spent to the DOT. I'm happy to take any questions on that. And if you want to go into detail about who is responsible at each level of this map, I'm happy to answer that as well.
What's different? What is the distinction, the clear distinction between minor and major?
It really has to do with the traffic volumes. That's the major distinction. In terms of going from a major collector to a minor arterial, there's not a whole lot that happens. It's all still within the jurisdiction of the MPO when it comes to funding. So there's no major changes there. It's just we want to continuity the corridor.
So what's the difference of how many cars the major and a minor handle? Is there what's the volume?
What's the volume?
I mean,
It
what's
kind of depends on the corridor. So it's like this 78 corridor we can see somewhere between 3,000 and 6,000, but a minor collector could be, or the collector itself could be anywhere between like 1,500 and 3,000.
The change kind of dictates the signage, driveways, access control.
Yes, especially for Polk County, the city. I don't think it changed that much.
And from a financial standpoint, if you're asking for something, does it modify it? Okay.
And what is, at a high level, the responsibility switching to the, what does that mean?
So the responsibility falls on the MPO just to have the resolution that says we're going to
Resolution.
change. Yeah.
So we're okay with the change.
We're okay with the change. Yeah. And that goes back to this map.
No
this
financial.
map that I would use you guys. So essentially, just to get the high points, if it falls in the county area outside the planning area, it's county's responsibility. If it falls in the county inside the
When
planning
you say
area,
responsible, just meaning the classification of the.
to make who makes it, who asks the DOT?
no?
That's not what I think. I'm thinking.
Yeah,
Who-
right, right.
Yeah, I know.
So we're not fixing.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
He was not taking over the street.
Yeah, okay.
We're just playing in.
Polk County's still gonna do all of those things, all the maintenance.
Fair enough.
If Mark Holm caused us,
It must be a road thing.
it's a bigger deal for it to go from local to a major collector, or local from anything else, because local
Right.
is not eligible for funding
Yeah.
anything above it.
Right.
It's just more of those.
That's right. Kind of
Area.
Okay.
All right.
You want me to move it?
Yeah, we don't.
It's just
Okay.
discussion, right?
All right, I'm Mike Marcus. We've got the regional safety performance targets.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, we've got them all.
So I think last time we met, we talked about some safety targets. These are now our required federal highway administration targets that we have to do every year for a 5-year period. This set of targets is going to look at 2022, 2026, and we're going to have 5 targets that we have to share with IOGC, Federal Highway Administration, which are fatalities, the rate of fatalities, the number of serious injuries, the rate of serious injuries, and the total number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. So in September, the IMPOC established their targets, which are shown on the screen in the table. The MPO is responsible for either 1, accepting and supporting IOGC's targets, or 2, developing our own regional targets. And we have 180 days from when the IOGC set their target to achieve those, which is February 27th this year. So historically, when in 2016, when these rolled out, the MPO set regional targets, and then for several years we supported the IODOT's targets, and then with the comprehensive safety action plan and the Vision Zero goal, we went back to setting our own targets.
That's the rates per 100 million vehicles. The VMT, how does that get figured?
The GMT gets calculated based on roadway miles, traffic volume.
How do we track that?
Well, the DOT used to get that for us, based on traffic count data that they collect.
So they just put traffic counts here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah.
Go.
And they used to have these nice folks that each city could get their own DMT rates. We now use their GIS data run back.
Okay. So it's because that number can skew, and as we drive.
Yeah,
And the
and
numbers change.
and it depends on how frequently we collect that data. Okay. So the most recent data for our region is collected in 2020.
So just like the numbers up above can be going up, but not really going up just because we have more miles driven. It's we go up.
Yeah. So based on the previous year recommendation to set our own targets, staff developed a set of performance targets for the 2022 to 2026 period, and those are shown here. I will note that the targets that are on the screen here are different than what was included in the agenda packet, and that's due to when we were waiting on final numbers for 2025 to actually make these estimates. And when we put the agenda together, we were actually trying to forecast out what was potential for December. So feeling much more confident.
Not motorized, is that like
Pedestrian, bicyclists.
jumping on a meatball or us?
No, still have to be.
It's still gonna be traveling.
Gotta be in
it free. Okay.
You can't be parked at a table drinking wine.
What's the point of the zero goal again? 'Cause I know that was always a Chris Coleman thing, and I got his point, but it's not realistic. I don't know.
It's very good. Because I would love to show you my next slide where I talk about. No. So the MPO through the CSAT has set a Vision Zero target 2045. So our goal is to have zero fatalities and serious injuries by 2045. These targets have to be set for a 5-year period, and they end next year. Right. So we're saying with these targets, here is what our 5-year average is going to be at the end of 2020. So what that looks like is here is our observed in these columns, and you can see we've had pretty high numbers previously, above 40 fatalities per year. This last year we had what I think will end up being 24.
What does it take 45, 48 time? What do we
Just our
baseline?
Yeah. Okay.
So high is based on us, not other people.
Correct. Yeah. Just the peaks in the
High being above zero.
I being above. So this last year was a very positive year for the number of fatalities. In significant reduction, much lower than historic numbers, which gives us a lot of hope that we can continue. If you look at, and I know that these purple diamonds here are pretty hard to see. This is our trend of targets that we've been setting, these performance targets that are required by Federal Highway Administration. Typically, we just set these and say, they're going up based on the source. Last year, this was our baseline number the previous year, and we decided to stay in line with Vision Zero, so we brought it down a little bit. Looking at the trend of recent observed rates and getting to zero fatalities in 2045, here's our trend line. If we were just saying we're going to stay on that trend, it's that red line there. The CSAT lays out a different trend line that looks at period 2018 to 2022, and then says we're going to stay stable until 2025, and then we're going to start decreasing. And mostly that was set up because our plan is going to be completed in 2025, so that's when we start to see that decrease. After looking at all this, staff is recommending for fatalities that we set our 2026 end year target in line with our CSAT, our comprehensive safety action plan, so that about 35 fatalities. That's a 5-year rolling average. To hit this, we would have to have fatality number that is below 30. So it'd still be a very positive trajectory downward from our historic trend. So that's fatalities. Any questions on fatalities? Okay. Serious injuries, we did something very similar. I'm not going to go into terrible amount of detail because we already talked about what these numbers are and how we got there. One thing to note is that for serious injuries, the CSAT and the Vision Zero trajectory are essentially the same. So again, we said, let's mark it on the CSAT and put it here. Again, to achieve this 5-year average, we need to have a reduction in serious injuries. Non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, we did something very similar, where we said, what's the observed for fatalities and serious injuries, what's that rate, and how do we get there with Vision Zero. The only difference between the previous two and this one is that the CSAT doesn't actually have a trajectory or target for non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. So we are saying that we should set it in line with this Vision Zero trend line to get us to 0 fatalities in 2045. So all that said, staff is recommending these numbers be our reported numbers to Iowa DOT and Federal Highway Administration for the years 2022 to 2026. Happy to take as many questions about this as we're all good.
Thank you.
Ted, do you want to ask about?
Well, I mean, I would agree with the trend lines and trying to be aggressive with, following those trend lines and trying to reduce that as much as possible. I just don't get the Vision Zero thing. Again, I understand what Chris used to say, where we shouldn't set a target for X number of deaths. I get that, but there's also, I've always taught when you're setting a goal, it needs to be achievable and realistic, and a zero is not either of those things. So I'm just not following.
So
A lot of this comes from federal highway and DOT. So when you're talking about realistic, I mean, we're dealing with government here. So, I mean, that's really, I mean, DOT is, I mean, the Vision Zero.
well, that explains a lot.
Yeah.
What is Vision Zero now, how you get there, but
You're setting yourself up for failure because you're never going to get there.
You'll get more fraud.
I get that.
So
and the goal is
It's just a philosophy.
What?
to keep decreasing.
Yeah, no, I get that.
Yeah,
I support that, obviously, but
We
yeah.
have a better indication too with the whole next year of being hands-free legally, or, it's the whole year will be enacted and they've already seen what a decrease, so. I'm not saying we're getting-
Government gets squeamish when they say, well, we only want to have 5 deaths.
I know.
and I'll note that there are a few communities that have had Vision Zero goals and have actually achieved it. Hoboken, New Jersey is one where for a number of years they've actually had 0 fatalities. They still have serious injuries. Essentially, I don't know their numbers on that, but they've reduced fatalities to 0. And then a lot of it historically goes back to Scandinavian countries that have made this a goal for decades. And they've actually seen reduction where their numbers are significantly lower than even having this. I get it.
All right, any other questions? Not, Marcus will go to Safe Streets for All partial grant award.
So now that we've set some targets, how are we going to fund it? We got awarded money. Congratulations. So USDOT announced just before Christmas the fiscal year 2025 awards to the Safe Streets and All program, Safe Streets and Roads for All program. The Des Moines area MPO received a partial award totaling $4.62 million for supplemental planning. So, as you might remember, we had a lot of different components to our proposed grant. We had Solution Package 1, which was mostly construction projects, roundabouts, tunnels for pedestrian crossings, things like that. Solutions Package 2, which was a lot of study documents, including a regional speed study, traffic incident management training, and some policy enhancement study work. And then we had a Solutions Package 3 that combined a study and some construction implementation dollars into what we were calling the Roadway Safety Act program. So what got funded? We did not get any funding for construction projects. So our big ticket items didn't receive any funding. We got funding awarded for the supplemental planning projects in our second solutions package. And then for package 3, we got the planning portion, which is the roadway safety audits. We did not get funding for construction.
This is going to sound really stupid. Yeah, but do we have to use it for what they said?
You will have to use it for the solution for the planning elements. One of the issues is we actually requested more funds than we had in our partial funding. So we will have to make some decisions on where we trim back what we thought the request was going to be. But yeah, we do need to. We can't use the planning funds for construction. That seems like about $4.62 million.
That should keep you busy, Dylan.
Well, and we'll get into this. We'll get into this in a second.
Don't do
But-
anything, just.
I would never give you money to do it.
Yeah, exactly. The biggest portion, of course, is going to be the roadway safety audit program, which really is a benefit to communities and is driven by your staff. So a couple of things that we just want to touch on because these are always questions that we're going to hear about. We need to talk about grant applications and funding. So the match, you may remember in May, before we submitted the grant application, we discussed this. Our recommendation at the time was that member communities be responsible for community-specific projects. So in the case of the planning, there was Altoona had a project, and then the cities of West Des Moines and Clive combined for the University Avenue. So those projects would be responsible, or those communities would be responsible for the match for those two projects. And then the member communities would also be responsible for the match on the regional portion of this low-cost countermeasure project and road safety on a combo, solutions package 3. We did not get awarded for this, but we got awarded for this. So we'll work with your communities and your staff to identify the corridors, what that match would be, and try to do that on an annual basis so that we can hopefully budget those community city budgets.
We have a sense for why none of the implementation projects were approved and how we can potentially get that.
We don't yet. I'm gonna skip this part. But do have a debrief requested with SS40 staff at USDOT so that we can get a better understanding of that, hopefully before the next grant application, so that we can maybe fine tune some of our projects or however we describe it and potentially resubmit for those, which is generally what happens, right? You submit once, they tell you how to submit again, hopefully.
Say you do use this money to do some planning and community, and we get funding later for construction. Will that planning sit on the shelf still be viable? Or do we have to go back and go through it, or?
So
what good does it do to spend the $4.6 million on planning?
Right. Can't
Does
implement
it
it.
just collect us on a shelf and then I can't use it later? Or?
ideally, this is how we had built this plan. So the largest portion again is that roadway safety audit program. And what that's going to look at is the corridor and the fire high entry network. And it's going to say, here are the recommended improvements for safety for this corridor. And then the way that we had described it to USDOT was we wanted 4.8 million to then the next year turn around and construct low cost countermeasures on that corridor. Now, we'll still have these plans. We are also currently going through conversations about funding changes. One of those conversations included some discussion about this as a potential solution that could move forward. So,
What about the list on the other side? That none of that got funded, but I mean, that's part of projects. I know at least that we're doing, like the Southwest 9th roundabout.
yeah,
That's not, I mean, that's part of the phase 3,
go forward.
Reapply.
but we don't get.
You would have to reapply if you want to.
Or you build a social.
The city can come up with the money to do it, so.
Yeah,
Yes,
Pretty flush, so.
I think.
but
I didn't say you had.
the one planning component that I think Dean you're getting at is, this is gonna be community specific corridor project. How do we fund those? And we've already started having conversations with the funding review committee about, is there a way that we could create a package of funds for?
But say Altoona has a project and we want to move forward with it, and the planning will help us.
Yeah.
If we want to pay for it,
Yeah.
say we want to fund it ourselves. We can use that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Carol, did you want
I just want to take a picture of it, probably get really to it.
Why don't you just send it to her? We should have taken a picture of it.
So the other thing that we discussed tonight was for these regional elements, how we're gonna staff it and how we're gonna do the work. So we had recommended potentially using our consultant for the roadway safety audit program, hiring a consultant for the speed study, and then the PIN training, we had anticipated potentially doing something with staff led element of that. We're having some additional conversations with saying, does that make sense if we're going out with consultants and just adding consultant? Haven't made that decision yet, but typically the approach is going to be we're going to have consultants on board that then the communities can also use for and help lead this project. So it's not
Is the grant paying for the consultant?
okay. Similar to the CSAP. Okay.
And all the communities get to use it?
Yeah, so if Des Moines gets identifies a roadway safety audit corridor, we would run it through our program and the consultant would be selected and awarded that project with the one staff helping lead that project.
Here's how it works, Joe. There's 4.62 million. The one gets 4.2. It's 5 and Altoona want these scrap for the rest of it.
Exactly.
First, right.
Yeah, I expected Joe to say that. I'm not gonna say
Do we
anything. I'm just gonna be quiet.
Do we have to match these?
For the safety audit program, each community that gets one of those roadway safety audits will do the match for those. The MPO will be the match for the speed study, the TIN training, and the education program.
Okay, just wanted to, I thought I heard there was a match part somewhere in there.
So if you add it up, our match looks like it's going to be about 170,000.
So the next steps before we can do anything with our planning today this morning, we'll be working with, and Joe staff will be working with Federal Highway Administration on the grant agreement. When the grant came out, they said it would take about a year to get the selection and the grant agreement. So 6 months is what we would anticipate based on their timeline. That could be 6 months. It could be like 8 month implementation from 18. So
Do the plan.
to do the grant.
You get the agreement even.
So we're still a ways out. We have
18 months. That's for the situation you guys are in. You've waited for 18 months to get your grant.
Yeah,
So we're hoping for 6 months. We're hoping that by June we'll have a grant agreement and we'll be moving forward with the program. Like you mentioned, we're going to have that debrief hopefully the next 2 months with SS418 at USDOT so that we can understand the implementation projects and prep for potential another grant to do the implementation projects, those construction projects. We'll also be working on identifying that first round of roadway safety audit corridors that we want to do so that we can get that in front of your communities. So that you can all be prepared for whatever batch is needed for those in that process. And then we will also be prepping the draft RFPs for the consultant services so that once we have the grant agreement signed and good to go, we can move into RFP and consultant selection.
So if I'm confused about this roadway safety, what explain to me what that is, because I don't understand it. Sorry.
No, it's perfectly fine. The 9th Street corridor, right? That study is very similar to a roadway safety audit. You're looking at safety concerns, you're looking at traffic patterns, you're looking at all the things that you do for that roadway corridor. But the major components that you're going to include are smaller in size, so it's not going to be you're reconstructing the whole corridor with multiple roundabouts or major intersection improvements. It's you're going to do low cost, bump outs and maybe a roundabout is included in the design. You're going to do those components all focused on safety. And then that's your study. So it's a safety study of people
So if you wanted to go to freedom.
with probably a smaller budget than I before.
So
So between now and the policy meeting, can you reach out to some of our other regional MPOs or national? Get a flavor for, did anybody get any implementation dollars? I have a feeling this is a federal, well, we're not going to do infrastructure stuff right now, while they do all of their recalculating and trying to claw back money and.
They do have a map that they produced that shows you what regions receive funding. So I know the Omaha MPO did receive implementation dollars, and we'll be reaching out to them to find out what did you ask for?
Yeah.
And it could be a terminology thing. The administration doesn't like the term road diet. So if you put money in there for road diet, they didn't fund it. But if you call something else, maybe they funded it. It could be considered that.
Yeah.
It could be that they had a lot more planning dollars available than they did. I know with the funding program we received for the CSAP, there was a lot of leftover money for that. So if they just combined it and said, we can spend a lot more on planning, we don't have enough for infrastructure, that's just how it shook out. Yeah, we'll check it.
It should give us money to, planning, so we would know what's going on, planning to do features.
Yeah, especially if you.
Not terrible.
Yeah.
Any questions? Thank you.
It's got something to do.
Up next, we have our draft public participation plan. Oh. Imagine that.
Thanks for that cue. We're perfect.
Right on cue. Let me get my pen.
Yeah, well, good afternoon. Thank you. Good to see you again in the new year. Hope everyone had good holidays and everything. We're talking about a draft public participation plan. Public participation plan is one of the key documents that we maintain here. It is effectively an outline of all the activities we do to engage the public and around the MPO plans, programs, and other planning. So it is now ready for public comment and is published on our website along with the form. We asked Tech this morning to share links and just provide their stakeholder groups opportunities to comment as they see fit. I'm going to briefly talk about some of the changes that are noteworthy between our current public participation plan and one that will replace it. The first is it kind of clarifies some of the purposes of what the MPO does, what our role is versus what the roles of our jurisdictions are, just to bring some clarity around there. The other thing it does is it updates how we approach our roundtables, and I'm going to talk about that next. We added an ADA compliance facility checklist. This is a follow-up to a recommendation that we received as part of our quadrennial review with Federal Highway. Updated resources within the document, updated links, etc. Broadened out our toolbox of outreach opportunities or tools. Reprioritized and brought forward our public comments form on our website just to make that more accessible. And then last, I'll note that staff was reviewing any change in guidance at the federal level that dictate changes that we need to make in the public participation plan. There are none so far. I do want to acknowledge that this is Allison Riley leading this plan. She's at BDSM today, so I'm covering for her. But with that, I gladly try to answer any questions.
Yeah, I think if you go to the next slide, I think the roundtable stuff is all one item. You can.
We'll jump into roundtables. One of the things that we tried to do as part of this planning process was align the roundtables that we manage with the strategic direction of the organization, as well as with some of the planning needs. We're trying to be very intentional about if we as staff are taking the time to convene a group around a topic, we want to make sure that it's directly relevant to MPO work products. And so what you see here on the left is a column of what we had been operating in recent past, and in the center is where we're headed. And then on the end, we have some notes here, and I'll go through these briefly. Like I said, roundtable is being split. So there's going to be an active transportation roundtable and a trails transportation or a trails roundtable. And really what we're dealing with, like I said, there's kind of two focus areas. One was on trails maintenance, data, or recreational side, and then there's other on-street active transportation. There's a lot of overlap between those two. There was enough interest in those two that we thought it would be appropriate to have separate tables there. Environmental roundtable, that's something been around for a while, but it often turned into just conversation without any meaningful direction on MPO work products. And so that's an example where we're not ceasing to pay attention to this, but we're just choosing not to be the lead table. We are going to instead participate in other tables where those conversations that are taking place. Traffic Management Advisory Committee, this is one that we're evolving to meet our current planning needs.
And in this case, we're looking at a Vision Zero roundtable to really help guide things that the MPO is doing, what the jurisdictions can be doing, and otherwise pull a diverse group of stakeholders who can help lead that effort. Smart City Roundtable, this is another example of a place where we're still paying attention to it. We're not going to be hosting the table, however. And then the last one I'll note is the Transportation Advisory Group. This is something that we've operated jointly with United Way for a long time. It's really focused on health and human services part of the transportation network. And so we're rebranding that as the Opportunity Roundtable and working with them on that. Last thing I'll note is that staff has been working hard to have common language to support clear communications. And we've been a little bit fast and loose with how we label our various groups. In fact, we weren't always clear what the committee, what the subcommittee, what the steering committee was around table. And so we tried to take some parameters around that just for clarity for us speaking as well as for our communications with you all. And so we've really differentiated between, is it open participation or is it more invited and collected? Is it an ongoing topic or is it something of limited duration specific to a particular plan? So that's what we've done here. That's what I hope you saw our question. That's the end of the update on the public participation. This is not going to be the last time you hear about this. We'll be bringing it back to you after the comment period for
Questions? All right, moving on to fiscal year 2027 Unified Planning Work Program.
We are already looking ahead and excited to get to work in the next fiscal year. This is the time of year where we tell you what we've been doing, where we're headed, what we anticipate, and then also ask you for your input of what activities should or should not be included in the next fiscal year. So the scope of work and budget will be for the period beginning July 1st, ending June 30th, 27. This justifies the use of federal plans, communicates to you all what we're doing. Note the dates that are important here. April 1st when the draft is due, plan will be due on June 1st. Before asking you to look ahead to the next fiscal year, I want to pause and look at our current fiscal year. This is the project tracking sheet to give you a glimpse of where we're at with the major elements in our work plan this year. I'll focus your attention at the center column on progress there. The takeaway for me, and I hope for you, is that we're on track with all of our projects here. I think a couple of them got delayed a little bit with the staff transitions that we've had to do and some of the natural ebbs and flows of planning processes. But generally, I want you to take away that we're on track. The next thing I'd like to do for you briefly is talk about the MPO performance survey. This came from a suggestion. Did you ask us to do this again? And it was time. And so we did a survey of our TPC members, and that was open from November, December. Staff would have liked to gotten a little bit better response rate, but we did get 6 responses. And this isn't the end all be all, but it is helpful as we start to think about activities for the next year. I'll go through these relatively quickly. Obviously, these slides will be published afterwards, so if you want to dig in deeper later, you can. Orange, red are generally agree, favorable, and the blue is more disagree, I don't know. So generally what you're seeing is support or agreement for the statements like our communities incorporate MPO plans, where MPO is involved in transportation planning. I understand my role as a committee representative. I participate in regional transportation planning. MPO is heading in the right direction. TTC meetings are productive use of time. Agendas and emails are the right level of information. But pretty positive overall. Next up, this is a rating of all the major MPO work products and whether they're being actively used or not. Again, red, green, red and orange is more agree, favorable, and then blue is the more I don't know or not important. So generally what you're seeing is that they're among the respondents, they're saying there's importance in these work products. There was some discussion at Tech about past transportation plan being among the lesser valued plans. And that I think brings back to us the importance of raising that back up, making sure it's being done in a way that is useful to our jurisdictions. Next up, this is a question that is less relevant to UPWP and more relevant to the funding review, but we did ask some questions about the process and generally I found a mixed bag here.
a lot more people are starting to say, we find that the scoring process for our funding is a little bit challenging to use, more complicated than it needs to be. There's some divide over whether, where decisions are politics or whether are based on points or scoring. We also ask questions pertaining to safety. This builds on the conversation that we had with Marcus earlier about, should we be prioritizing safety as a key priority in our funding decision? Should we have a program for this one stuff? Generally favorable on those. We'll be bringing this up to our funding review committee later this month and discussing in more detail about what it means. Lastly, a couple takeaways we've been trying to bring member updates. So we've had Moines here talk about their Safe Streets for All. We had Norwalk here. We've recently talked about a new corridor. That's been met with a lot of favor. People really like that, so we can try to do more of that. Might do some local project tours. That's kind of we'll see, but that might be something we can start doing. And then trying to connect the dots between NPO money being invested in projects in the tip, and how those are impacting our performance measures. I'll encourage you to read the quote. It was nice, gave us some warm and fuzzies to the staff, so thank you for said that. And then we had to give us a 5-star rating. Yeah, 4 stars. That was 5 4-star reviews, 1 3-star. Well, thank you.
So probably with your eyes.
Right. Yeah.
Nobody can.
Yeah. Or any relevant comments?
I'll just end by saying there are 3 things that we've identified for the next UPWP that we anticipate. The transportation plan, which you've heard us talking about in November, a Vision Zero roadway program on it that coming to the SS4A money, and then also implementation by your recommendation of the budget committee. That's one of the things that we're anticipating. We will think about.
Sounds like good. Thank you, David. Moving on, officer selection process. Yep.
Yeah, just real quick, want to recap the officer selection process. So now that we're into the new year, we, in theory, are getting all of the representatives appointed by the city councils and so forth.
I like that.
Some we haven't received yet, but I know their council meetings, they just haven't met and haven't gotten to this point. By the end of this month, we will have a new list of who all our primary reps are, as well as our this committee, who's on the executive committee. The chair will appoint a nominating committee, and in February, you will then select who the new officers will be that will then take office in March. So we talked about this a little bit last time, just kind of giving you an update of where we're at. Got most of what we need to have those elections that will happen next month.
Questions? All right. We have some next are informational items. If anyone has any questions, we'd be happy to answer those. Otherwise, the information is contained in. None. Move on to other non-action items. Committee.
One thing, and I mentioned this to Mark the other day, we're going to try something different with our orientation. Now that we have new reps coming in, we like to do an orientation. It's usually kind of a stuff you come before the policy meeting and we talk at you for an hour. We're going to feed you this time. So we're going to do this prior to the tech meeting next month in February, called Pancakes and Partners. And we'll have pancakes, we'll talk NPO stuff, we'll try to get, just a little bit of everyone get to know each other and orient
I
to
don't
the
really
NPO.
understand. So I mean,
Probably
need to go to that. I never got an orientation. Go. Oh, what happens?
Sometimes it happens for one-on-one, sometimes it happens in a group. We're gonna hybrid this a little bit.
My orientation was everybody fighting it.
Yeah.
That's a good time. Yeah.
Oh, it's open to anybody.
Yeah, you guys got to get pancakes. I think I heard. Yeah.
Sure.
Let's put Dylan in a chef hat behind the president.
Dean called that orientation Thunderdome.
Underdog.
Oh, you came out.
Yeah.
Like,
Stop. All right.
One other thing I'll mention back to the audit real quick. I didn't want to mention this while the auditor was still on there. They informed us that we have like a 3-year contract with them that is expired, and they've told us that the rate will increase by like threefold. We're already due to do an RFP for audit services anyway, but that'll be something you'll see in the coming month, doing an RFP. And we'll see what we get some people partners. We might have to budget more for auditing services.
A lot of it's because of that complication of icon. Is that something?
I don't know that it was that necessarily. I think that's
in general.
I think just in general. I know from other organizations that
Yeah,
use them, they.
they have, they've got some different.
If you find a cop,
I gotta go look at something else myself after 33 years. Because that's what I used to. They've got crazy pricing.
Anything else? Any other, anyone have any other non-business items? Me? Hearing none, our next meeting is gonna be, the exec committee is gonna be on February 5th, 11:30. Anyone else have anything else to add? We are adjourned.
I'll give you a quick little update for me. I skipped my fourth chemo Monday because my enzymes were too high in my liver, which was great. Skipping chemo is kind of nice.
It's like a vacation.
Well, I feel